millions of lower-income Canadians don't file their taxes, either because they don't have the resources to do so or because they think that their income is too low for it to matter. And that means, too often, that the people who most need benefits often don't get them. This program will pay out hundreds of millions of dollars in benefits in the next few years that would otherwise be left unclaimed, helping our most vulnerable get the supports that they need.
Prime Minister Mark Carney drove out to his suburban Ottawa riding this morning and delivered a series of affordability announcements. There was one new one and two continuations. First, automatic tax filing for low-income Canadians. The federal government is also making the National School Food Program permanent. And the Canada Strong Pass will be renewed over the winter holidays and next summer. Now, that pass gives free admission to national parks and discounts for camping, museums, and more. The PM says automatic filing will help hundreds of millions will deploy, hundreds of millions in benefits that are currently going unclaimed. But how will the CRA deliver on that program? Joining us now is Liberal MP and former Treasury Board President Jean-Yves Duclos. Welcome back to Power Play.
Well, good evening, Mike, and good evening to everyone listening.
So the service challenges remain at CRA despite this program. A month ago, on this show, Secretary of State Wayne Long, who does oversee the Canada Revenue Agency, said that it was so bad, quote, Revenue Canada hit rock bottom. So how can you add this new layer of work and expect services not to suffer?
Two things on this. The first one is Secretary of State Long did say there is a significant work being undertaken now at the CRA to meet a 100-day plan to deliver better services to Canadians. And and second, one part of that plan is now to, as Prime Minister Carney, I think, nicely and correctly summarized, is to make sure that more Canadians can claim their benefits by having access to an easier way to file their tax return. Many of them, as you heard, believe that it might not be worth their time, or they may not have the resources or the interest to make a tax return. But what happens is that then they miss on the Canada Child Benefit, they miss on the Guaranteed Income Supplement for seniors, they miss on the Canada Workers Benefit for workers. They also may miss on the Canadian Dental Care Plan because they are not found to be eligible, not having submitted their tax return. So for all of these reasons of fairness and efficiency, it's important for the CRA to allocate some of its resources towards that plan.
Yeah, I don't think anyone is denying the benefits that could be coming to more Canadians. I just wonder how they will get them, because according to your own government's numbers, between September 1st and September 5th, only 57% of calls to CRA were answered.
Well, that's exactly the point. So it needs to provide better services. It also needs to acknowledge that many of those calls are made by people who don't have the means and the resources and the understanding to make a tax return. So with the technology that already exists, that technology exists and is working, with that technology being expanded to up to 5.5 million Canadians by tax year 2028, the burden on the CRA will be lower, but most importantly, Canadians will have the ability to file their tax return and to get the benefits that they totally deserve.
But Mr. Duclos, if they can't already handle the burden that they're dealing with right now, how can you add more burden to the people who are working for CRA when you consider that the union is saying that wait times for calls right now is 3.5 hours? If you're giving them more work to do, how is that going to help the burden that they already have to deal with? And how will Canadians actually get these benefits if the union says they're already suffering under the work that they're trying to deal with right now?
And that's a fair question. And the answer is what you would have heard just a few weeks ago when Secretary of State Long and Minister Champagne said that the most important problem was the use of technology. No, they were technologies that didn't fit together, technologies that were not being used by the CRA, and that's exactly the point here. The technology exists and is working, but it's not used sufficiently well and sufficiently enough by CRA agents. So they will be switching to that technology, which works really well. The problem is it is not just not available to those millions of Canadians that would benefit from it, and benefit obviously from the benefits that they will get if they are successful at filing their tax return.
So what kind of technology will help? Because the reason I ask about all of this, right now the Union of Taxation Employees have said that 3,000 jobs have been cut at CRA since last fall, including a decision not to renew the contracts for 1,300 call center employees. So is there technology that can really compensate for all of those lack of employees?
No, it has to be balanced. You will also have heard that a number of new employees have been hired, and existing employees have been shifted from areas which require less work to areas like the one we're talking today, where more work is needed. And in addition to a better and greater use of technology, we firmly believe that, again, almost 6 million Canadians by 2028 tax year will have, and low-income Canadians in particular, because this is targeted to lower-income Canadians, those Canadians will find it easier and sometimes quite easy to file their tax return and then get the benefits that are associated with it.
I want to take a wider view at things because, of course, this is one of those affordability measures that your government is putting in the window. A number of polls are showing that Canadians are really concerned about that as one of their top priorities. So what other measures can we expect in the federal budget to help Canadians with the cost of living, as that is top of mind for everyone in this country?
Well, we'll obviously have to see on November the 4th, but two measures have already been announced, not completely implemented because we now need to have parliamentary approval. But one of them is a reduction of income tax, a middle income tax cut for 22 million Canadians. So that's many of those currently listening to us today. Another one is the removal of the GST on the purchase of new homes on the part of first-time home buyers. So this is a very significant benefit, especially for for younger Canadians, a benefit of up to $50,000 on the purchase of a new home. And we'll see what November the 4th budget brings more. But as you know, and as we've heard, and that's important to remind everyone perhaps, is that November the 4th budget will be a budget where we will be spending less on operations, but investing more in the growth that Canadians need to see for better wages and better jobs.
And I want to ask you about that because there is a lot of spending in the upcoming budget. But in 2024, the Parliamentary Budget Officer estimated that the CRA program that is being introduced today could cost between $1.6 and $1.8 billion. And there are a lot of other spending programs, as you had just mentioned, two of them there. There are estimates that the deficit in this budget will be around $90 billion. Is that something that you personally are comfortable with?
Well, the goal is, well, there are two main goals, as I mentioned one of them earlier, so to spend less in order to invest more, but also to bring to zero in about 3 years from now the operational deficit. So that's the deficit of the federal government when it comes to funding its operational expenditures. That's something important because if we free up resources on operations, we have more resources to invest in Canadians, in businesses, and in workers, and in Canadians like today that need affordability support to make ends meet. So these are the broadest objectives of the budget. Today, as we've discussed, now there are additional measures. One is a national school food program, which is again targeted to lower income families, at least families with more modest incomes, whose children would sometimes go to school without being fed with an empty stomach. So this is something that is very appreciated in my writing, certainly, because it not only it reduces poverty, because it's about $800 per family of 2 children that benefit from the program. It also makes those children grow better, learn better, and help, obviously, in many other dimensions.
I understand all of that, but I wanted to ask you, as somebody who used to be the president of the Treasury Board and essentially had to be the chief accountant for the government and making sure that everybody was staying within their means, are you comfortable standing behind a government budget that says it'll have a $90 billion deficit?
We need to look at where those dollars are invested. Are they invested in the most efficient manner and targeted towards those Canadians that need the support even more than otherwise? So and that is being done again by making the government more efficient, by bringing down operational costs and the operational deficit, and investing more to create more jobs, better jobs, and also, Mike, to acknowledge that we are in the middle of a crisis now. We tend to be thinking of Canada as being isolated as we now speak, but Canada is impacted by a world crisis that we have not seen in decades. So in that type of crisis, we need to control what we can control, and that it means investing in jobs and businesses and in supporting affordability for Canadian families.
Okay, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. Liberal MP and former Treasury Board President Jean-Yves Duclos, thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike, and good evening, everyone.